Welcome to the Festival of Dangerous Ideas podcast. My name is Danielle Harvey and I'm the festival director. FODI is the original Disruptive Ideas Festival based in Sydney, Australia, that aims to bring to light important conversations that push the boundaries of conventional thought. FODI gathers the world's best experts, innovative thinkers and mischief makers to provoke and inspire curious minds. Is God a story we've just told ourselves to satisfy our own desires? Comedian and author David Baddiel knows God doesn't exist, but wishes he did. Wrestling with his understanding of God and spirituality as a Jewish atheist, Baddiel's bold thesis uncovers how religion services the deepest needs of humanity. This is the 2024 session, inaugural John Caldon Provocation, The God Desire, with David Baddiel in conversation with philosopher Simon Longstaff.
Now you've seen a little bit about the extraordinary life of John Caldon. I didn't know John. I've learned about him. But there's a couple of things which are worth noting in terms of tonight's John Caldon Provocation. This man was a contrarian. He was not just a contrarian. He was a Yorkshire-born, Cambridge-educated contrarian. They are probably the worst kind of contrarian to have in your life, because this was a man, for every bear that he ever saw, he wanted to poke it. No bear was safe when Caldon was around. And of course, he did this. He was a kind of equal opportunity provocateur. Didn't matter who you were, what you believed, you would be treated with that, which I've always considered to be a fundamental sign of deep respect. That you treat everybody as capable of engaging in that kind of conversation and engagement. And so when a man like that dies, sometimes that essence of them can pass away too. Because he wasn't just a businessman who reformed banking, introduced structured finance and things like that. He also built things that matter, like railways and all the rest, substantial physical assets that changed opportunities for a community. And that too can be forgotten. But after he died, Lindy Milan, who's sitting down the front here, wanted to commemorate John. And I think to commemorate the essence of the man that had done so much, that had meant so much to her, to the family, to the friends, which were lifelong, and to the community that was served. By a person that most people whose name they probably never heard, yet was making this contribution. And so I'm really, really grateful to Lindy, who pretty much in a tour de force has brought together the possibility of this John Caldon Provocation. And it's no small piece of work she's done with the support of others to do that. And the other thing about John, and they didn't put it, I don't think, here, is that he was an absolutely stalwart atheist. He really was like kind of right over the top kind of atheist. Richard Dawkins would have had a difficult time with him. But there's something peculiarly important then about the John Caldon Provocation being launched by our very special guest tonight. Now, if you've been to the festival for other things, and some of you won't, you've got a bit of a taste of what David Baddiel is like. He is a wonderfully thoughtful man. He's a philosopher, really. I know he comes across as a comedian and comic and controversialist to some degree, but actually what he does is he takes deep philosophical ideas about the world, where he ponders on his own experience, and in this case, the focus is on this remarkable book, which I hope you'll have a chance to read, called The God Desire. So please join with me in welcoming to the stage David Baddiel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello and welcome, and thanks for your being here. And
my pleasure.
And for the book. This is a pretty challenging thesis because you are, like John Caldon was, an atheist.
Yeah.
And yet you've gone and written a book which actually says you wish God was real, but I'm pretty sure he's not.
Right.
But you don't think we can escape the wish, the desire, and I think you'll probably unpack that a little bit. The other thing about it is that I think you probably wrote one of the most powerful books about antisemitism that I've seen.
Thank you.
And not only powerful as a book, but I think it came at a time when you're called to say, well, how come every other form of racism in the world is noticed and championed, but not this one? And if anybody doubts that's true, just have a chance to look at Jews Don't Count, which is the first book, to see, I mean, you really provide a lot of evidence as to why this isn't just an idle opinion. I read the two books in that order, Jews Don't Count and God Design, and I think they're absolutely connected. I don't know if you do or if you intended. So I wonder if you can start maybe talking about how those two things are related.
Yeah, okay. Well, one of the things about Jews Don't Count, if anyone's seen it or read it, is that it had a very sort of, a couple of things that I thought were on the nursery slopes of my point, which my basic point is that Jews are not seen by the gatekeepers of concern, minority offence, representation, inclusion, by progressives essentially as a proper minority, a minority who suffer real racism. And one of the things I was trying to say there is that anti-Semitism is racism. It's not religious intolerance. That's what a lot of people seem to think it is. And I think that is a basic point, and I never thought it would be that complex. But actually, in terms of the response that I've got on social media to Jews Don't Count, is that that's one of the things that people seem to think, oh, right. Oh, I never really thought about that before. And I make it clear in that book that anti-Semitism is not religious intolerance, with a very simple point, which is by saying that I am an atheist, but the Gestapo would kill me immediately. And indeed, my great-uncle Arno died in the Warsaw Ghetto, was not an observant Jew. And never mind the Nazis, I can promise you that white supremacists marching in Charlottesville and chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," they would not ask me if I kept kosher before they burnt down my house. So racists do not care about religion, right? And the racists are sadly the people who you have to be aware of when you're defining what racism is. And anti-Semitism hasn't been religious intolerance kind of for many centuries, and arguably never. We might get onto that later.
Yeah.
So once I'd talked about that and I'd done that book, I thought maybe I should try and talk about what it means to be a Jewish, because I absolutely identify as a Jew, as a Jewish atheist, because that seems to confuse a lot of people. As it happens, more Jews identify as atheists than in any other minority. Something like 50% of Jews identify as atheists. I personally sometimes use it to get out of things that I'm asked to do by my local Jewish community. Like my local rabbi rang me up a few Hanukkahs ago. I don't know how he got my number, presumably because Jews control the world, and said, "Will you light the menorah, you know, the big candelabra that Jews light at Hanukkah, will you light that outside the synagogue this year? Would you be the local Jewish celebrity?" And I didn't want to do that, and so I sort of played my trump card. I said, "I'm sorry, Rabbi, I'm an atheist." And he said, "So am I." I thought, fucking hell, there's really a lot more atheist Jews than I realised. And
Is that right?
that's true, it's a true
Wow.
story. But it's an important thing. It's an important thing in terms of, like, you know, understanding what actually makes a minority. It's not much to do with religion, right? And with Jews, it's often to do with ritual and culture and family and all the rest of it. And so anyway, I then decided when I was going to write a second book that I was going to try and define what that is, what a Jewish atheist is. So the book is partly an attempt to show that you can be an atheist while still being aware and still knowing that in your bones there is something about a cultural, religious, ritualistic background that you're not going to shake.
Okay.
Perhaps I could, shall I read
let's hear a bit about from the book, and then
Okay.
we might dig down a bit deeper in this.
Okay. So I'm going to read a bit. I have to change my glasses because I'm old. As you'll see about the book, a lot of it is basically about death. Sorry, I can see that's a bit topical for some people in the audience, but hey, me too. Don't worry about it. So don't let that put you off buying the book, for goodness sake, because solidarity. So what you should know, first of all, is that this book has got two epigraphs that I chose. They are, "Before the divine kingdom can be established in events, it has to be established in the mind, in the human imagination." That is Bishop Richard Harris, Thought for the Day, Radio 4, BBC Radio 4, 4th of November 2022. "And we cherish the illusion that exalts us more than a host of baser truth." Alexandra Pushkin. But on page 5, I sort of disavow these two. I say, when you write a book, you spend a fair bit of time thinking about the epigraph. The one I really wanted to use was not those two, it was this. A close friend once said to me, "But don't you want to believe in God?" I said yes, desperately. That's why I know he doesn't exist. It's the opening sentence of The Belief System, a book by an atheist thinker, Virginia Brooke. But Virginia Brooke is a character of my own devising who appears in my play, God's Dice. And using one of my own quotes as an epigraph is just too naff. I thought I might get away with it on the basis that this book is about the non-existence of something, so perhaps it would be apt to begin with a quote from a book that doesn't exist. I thought that might be meta and clever enough to carry it through, but in the end, it's just too Alan Partridge a move. Nonetheless, the quote does sit at the center of this essay. Most arguments for atheism are philosophical. Sometimes they tie themselves in knots, grappling with the issue of how you can prove the non-existence of something. At heart, they are based on the idea that there is no evidence for God's existence, therefore he doesn't exist, which might sound like atheist job done, but it isn't, as there is no concrete evidence for the existence of, for example, dark matter. Dark matter, which makes up 94% of the bloody universe. No evidence for it at all, it's just a conceit invented by scientists to explain away the large parts of existence that they can't account for, which is problematic from a no-God point of view, as that's basically the same conceit that priests and imams and rabbis have always used God for. My argument, on the other hand, is in a general sense psychological. It requires an admission, which frankly most atheists I've noticed aren't prepared to make, which is, I love God. The idea, that is, of him. For the purposes of this book, I'm going to stick with the patriarchal traditional pronoun, though I believe a modern God would almost definitely have a Twitter bio that ended they/them. Who would not love a superhero dad who chases off death? Some non-believers reading this will think, speak for yourself. It's common amongst atheists in trashing religion also to trash the rewards of religion, or to be more specific, to disavow the presence in themselves of what religion is there to serve. There is something a little macho in atheism. Some atheists divine correctly that what religion provides for human beings is comfort. And then in a way that can feel to me a bit adolescent, they feel impelled to say, comfort, that's for babies. But humans, a subset of which includes all atheists, are babies, however old and intellectual and cynical they grow. No matter how adult and controlled we seem on the surface, underneath we are a hive of wailing, impulsive, immediate need. I'm happy to admit to my own babyishness. This may be because, or rather why, I am a comedian. Much comedy is just that, stripping away the facade of adulthood. We are all winging adulthood, truly. There is only one adult in the world whose age in his soul lines up with the age he in fact is, and his name is Peter Dutton. In the book it says Michael Gove, by the way, but that's really... I panicked. I bottled the British reference halfway through. Hang on, I'll miss out that bit because I want to talk to Simon. I am flawed and shallow and scared and often desperately in need of comfort, both psychological and physical. I'm also, however, someone with enough self-awareness to perceive these as urges rather than as ideas. My thinking self, in other words, is distinct from my urgent one. Not all the time. I often find myself thinking I must eat now or I will die, even when it's only 11 in the morning. But I'm conscious, even as I think it, that this isn't a logical way to understand the world or even the phenomenon of feeling peckish. I know, that is, even as I experience desire, that it is desire, and that desire provides no frame for reality. The God desire should not have to lead to the God delusion. Yet the desire is real. For me, it is the very intensity of it which alerts me to the fact of fantasy, the need to imagine that there is an exit door, somewhere through which to escape constantly oncoming death is one that I can confidently predict exists within the deep recesses of most humans. And the pressure of that desire has always and will always lead to divine projection. People talk a lot about what it means to be human, about what separates us from the animals. Some of that is lyrical, love and empathy and stuff. I personally think it can be pinned down to the fact that we are the only animals who feel shame in defecating. But whether it makes us human or not, we are the only animal that from an early age is aware of the inevitability of death. So it is impossible to look at the repetitive creation of legends across every culture and throughout history, which in one way or another outsmart death and promise immortality, without concluding that God is a projection of a very fundamental desire within us for it not to be so inevitable. Thank you very much. So before I go on, just for you, can I just say there are two mistakes in that reading. So I'm supposed to have copy editors who tell me shit, but I wrote that, and it got printed and published. So firstly, there is evidence for the existence of dark matter. I'm sorry, any physicist in the audience. I know there's evidence.
Thank heavens we got that out of the way.
But however, we still don't really know what it is, so it's not completely wrong, but there are gravitational effects for it. And the other thing I'd like to apologise for is I have seen dogs look embarrassed when they're shitting. I definitely have. So those two things are wrong.
Two crucial things to admit, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased for the rigour in which you deal with that. I'm not sure a copy editor would pick that up, would they?
What about the dog? Or about the
dogs?
dog?
Yeah, no. Look, you promised that you'd dwell a bit on death, and you did.
Yeah.
And that's because, as I take it from reading, you actually reached this kind of moment where God started to become a present urge or desire when you're about 6, is that right? And
yes.
That was a death thing again, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I went to an Orthodox Jewish primary school, and last time I can remember praying was when I was about 6 or 7. I realised that we die. I'd worked that out, and I was praying in my bunk bed in Dollis Hill in Cricklewood in North London, and I was praying for many things. I was praying not just that I kind of would go to heaven, but also that I would see my parents after I died, which if you've read my book about my parents is kind of amazing because they had Olympian levels of neglect towards me, but nonetheless, my mother had an affair with a golfing memorabilia salesman and just turned our lives over to golf, so it's amazing that I wanted to see her again. But anyway, and then I'd like to see my cat and all sorts of things. Anyway, I remember talking about my mother, saying to my mother that I was frightened of death. And she tried to help me, and she said, don't worry, death is like a long sleep from which you never wake up. And from then on, I became a lifelong insomniac. And it's true, I am a lifelong insomniac, and I think insomnia is related to my fear of death.
Yeah.
And I think that, even though I wouldn't have understood it then, I think that even then, the intensity, the deep, deep desire to not die, proves something to me.
Okay, but what did you think you would? Can you remember what you thought you were doing when you were praying as a 6-year-old? Did you think there was something other and greater out there that could hear you, that might answer these prayers? And where did that idea come from? Was it just going to the school, the Jewish school, and they give you this idea that there's a force out there that can respond?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, because one of the things about Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, which is at least at school, I was brought up in that. So basically, where I lived in London in 1973, the nearest school, a Jew would not get beaten up for being a Jew, was a very Jewish school, but we were not really a properly Orthodox family. So I would be going to school wearing a yarmulke, wearing these things called tzitzit, which are like a sort of internal vest that have tassels. You don't put them on your nipples, but they have tassels. I was like eating kosher food. I was saying Hebrew blessings, all that. And in the morning, my dad was cooking me bacon sandwiches. So it was weird and mixed up and wrong. But one thing I was also confused about, and I remain confused about, I don't know if there's any rabbis in the audience, but Judaism and the vision of the afterlife is not clear.
Yeah.
Like the whole fucking point.
There's
really,
no heaven in the obvious sense.
The whole point of religion is that there is some kind of afterlife, whether it be reincarnation or whether it be heaven or whatever it is. But in Judaism, it's not very clear. And in fact, one of the interesting things about Orthodox Judaism is there are 613 mitzvot, by which I mean things you're meant to do as an Orthodox Jew, which are very, very minuscule, a lot of them. A lot of them involve putting like leather things around your hand and wearing the hat and not turning this on and not carrying this on this day and eating this food but not that food and all that stuff. And what I realized is that Orthodox Judaism is a form of OCD. Right? It is a form of OCD. And ask yourself why that is. OCD, I think, is something which makes people feel that the chaos of the world is somehow okay, that they are somehow safe if they do this ritual and not that ritual. So why would Judaism be like that? It's because this is a constantly persecuted bunch of people, constantly thinking they're about to die. So what can you do in that situation? You can say, if I do this thing and that mystical thing, I will live. I will be okay for the next minute. And Christianity doesn't have that.
Right.
Because Christianity, in a position of power, has a much more large arc towards death and reward.
I don't think anyone is going to dispute the story of constant persecution over millennia. But it's interesting, I don't know if you know this, but core Confucianism similarly has a very intense focus on the detail of how the mat is laid down. Right. There's a kind of precision to every movement which shows a kind of presence of mind.
That's really interesting.
So, and that's not a story of constant persecution as the basis for core Confucianism, if you go right back to the roots of what the actual Confucius was working through and teaching. Now I wonder though, whether or not it's not necessarily death itself that generally gives rise to this desire, but that death is a subset of a much more profound human concern, which is about the uncertainty of the human predicament. Not just at the end as to what happens next, but all the way along. You wake up in the morning, I don't know, a tree falls and it knocks down your car, or if you're in a primitive society, thousands and thousands of years ago, early times before writing things, there's floods that come and destroy your crops or kill your child or whatever. And it's an unbearable thought that this is just a random event. And so you think, there must be something that is driving this, and if I could understand what it was and propitiate it,
I could control it.
Yeah. So this is and I just wonder whether this is another angle that is possibly explanatory of this.
Yeah. So in the book, I talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
So as far as I see it, the religious impulse, or the impulse for there to be a God, because that's what I'm talking about, a desire that is answered by God. It isn't just about death. It is about giving meaning to life, giving order to life. One of the most important things it does is storify life. So humans only understand the world in terms of narrative and story. And if it has no story, i.e. if life does not have...
Just a series of incidents. Boom, boom,
just a series of chaotic quantum events. But instead we can think of it as having a beginning, middle and end, and indeed a moral justice. So evil people suffer and good people don't. And that seems to give a meaning and indeed a pattern, a fractal and an order to life. All of that is provided by God in one of his or her many forms. At the heart of it, I would still say that's about death. I mean, all the examples you just gave there were examples of a disastrous thing that might happen.
Yeah, I was trying to back away a little bit from always leading to death, because I don't want to fall into that trap.
Yeah, but it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I would say that the self-consciousness of death is what informs all those other issues. Now, they might not be straightforwardly about death, but that the fear and the anxiety generated by meaninglessness, by the sense that we are here for no reason at all, and that we are just dust in this, what John Updike calls this complex interval of light, that is something which is terrifying, but it's terrifying in the abstract, but it would not exist without our awareness.
So I see
of
two
death.
things in that idea. I see there is death as a cessation which may not have any further chance of existence. It may be related, but I think it's distinct, about the absence of meaning that some people impute, I think mistakenly, but that's not for me to argue now, mistakenly impute as an absence of God. Now you do tackle this. I don't think you are convinced, are you, by the argument that a moral life or a life of meaning is conditional upon a belief in God or the existence of God. You see that these things can emerge in the absence of God. Is that right?
Well, to be honest with you, Simon, I don't really go into that because a lot of atheism, I've noticed, is about this question, which is what would our society be like if tomorrow, or indeed historically, we'd never had a belief in God, if God wasn't there, if our moral codes, which to some extent are religious based, had not come from religion, where would we be? Would it be just anarchy and blah, blah, blah? And we might be, or we might not.
Because I thought you said that you didn't think we would be.
Well, in the book, I say something else,
right,
which is, the book is a short book, and it is primarily about an idea of truth. And it is, my idea of truth is that there is no God, and this is my reason, which is not about, what existed before the Big Bang, or does evolution, is it real, or what's going on in the quantum world, or whatever. It's not that. It's it's based on mass psychology, on a mass psychological yearning, which we still have, even post us being primitives, we still totally have a mass psychological yearning, essentially for something more than the material. That's answered by God. So I believe that doesn't exist, but because the book is primarily about that, my sense is that I am not that bothered whether society might be anarchic, might fall apart without those moral codes or not. The truth is the truth. And I think I use the analogy of if you throw a stone into some water, it creates ripples. Those ripples may be beautiful and lovely to look at, or they might lead to a boat overturning and people drowning, right? And those consequences are terrible or they're lovely. It's still true that the stone was thrown in the water and ripples were created. And that's all I'm talking about in the book. I'm talking about the book about why I think God does not exist. What might happen if there was a universal acceptance of God's existence, or by the way, what might happen if suddenly God appeared and everyone realized that he did exist. I'm sort of not talking about that.
Yeah, which is very important philosophically, because I'm just going to reframe it, that the truth remains true irrespective of its consequences.
That's right.
And we need to live with that.
That's right.
Now, you actually serve up to people who like an equation or two in their books, at least one equation, which is God, desire plus, was it absence of evidence?
Invisibility, I think.
Invisibility equals God.
Yeah.
Just
well, that's because, so one of the things about how I write these books is I just write them out of my head, really, and it's a very big privilege that I'm allowed to do that, and then they get published, and sometimes someone says to me, well, this isn't true, and I think, fuck, I'm going to have to change it. And so I was talking to Jonathan Safran Foer, the brilliant American writer, and the basic contention of the book is, this is something which we deeply want. We deeply desire it, so we've invented it because that desire is insupportable by itself. And Jonathan said, no, but you can want things and they are real. You can desperately want food and it suddenly appears. You can desperately want sex and it suddenly appears. Not that often at my age, I've noticed, but you can want those things and then they are there. So the idea that desire in and of itself is a marker of non-existence is not necessarily true. So I then had to slightly row back on it and say that I still believe that that is the psychology. That what I'm pointing to here is the psychology that creates God. That God is a projection of desire. However, that because there are things that you can want that really exist, then you have to go back a little and say that desire has to be attached to something which does not have any evidential reality. And that's how you find God out of that.
So you start off with saying that you really wish that there was a God, right?
Yeah.
What did you make? Did you engage at all with any of the philosophical arguments for God that don't require on proof of existence?
Like what?
The ontological argument that
I don't really know what ontological means.
Okay, it's to do with the nature. It's based on the nature of being. So
right.
One of the arguments that was advanced for the existence of God is that if you can conceive of anything that has the attributes of God and it is the greatest thing that you can possibly conceive, then one of the elements of it must be existence itself. So the very notion of the greatest thing that can possibly exist includes within it its own existence. So it's an argument based on logic rather than on evidence.
So if I think the greatest thing that's existed is David Bowie, then he's God? Or is that not what you're saying?
No. But if you could think that...
I've misunderstood.
No, you would probably... Well, if you wanted to call it David Bowie, but you'd have to give it all the attributes which are traditionally given to God.
Associated with David Bowie. Oh, no, right.
With God, rather.
Right, okay.
Which may be David Bowie, but as far as we know.
Okay.
But did you... I mean, I'm just thinking about your quest. If you've got this desire for something to exist you could go through and you could exhaust that search for the thing to be real by looking purely for evidence of it.
Well, I did
of
some
facts
of
and
it.
things like that. But I'm wondering about whether you
Okay, so
also
what I
felt
didn't
impelled to do the
You're a proper
philosophical.
philosopher. You're a proper philosopher. You've just used the word ontological, right?
That mate,
And so
obviously.
You're a proper philosopher. I'm not. But so what I didn't do, again, I just write this book out the top of my head, was read, all the thousands of philosophers, Aquinas, whoever it might be, who have written about the various versions of God. Instead, I dealt with the ones that I've happened to have come across. So, for example, a woman called Naomi Alderman, who is she's from an Orthodox Jewish background, and she wrote The Power, which is an amazing book that won the Orange Prize in Britain. She believes that God should be seen in terms of a literary character. So she was saying that God essentially is a story, and I think she tweeted me and said, so in the same way that Tony Soprano is real, God is real. And even though, what's the name of the guy who played him? James Gandolfini, thank you. James Gandolfini is dead, Tony Soprano continues to exist. And he continues to exist, as it were, in perpetuity. And I thought that was a good argument, but essentially it's a game. It's a game because it comes back to something, which is I am looking for a God that will save me from death. That's what I'm looking for, because that's what really God is. And I know that when I'm dead, neither James Gandolfini nor Tony Soprano will have any meaning for me. And I can tell the audience is now getting a bit depressed with the constant harping on about death. But the truth is that I think that's clever. It's a clever idea, but it has no reality in terms of sort of like what is the thing. Because when I say I would like God to exist, I don't really mean I would like someone really clever to come up with a postmodernist idea of how God is like a literary character, or how God has got an ontological reality that may or may not be like David Bowie. What I mean is that I want something that is actually miraculous. And actually, there is somewhere that you can find that, and it's quantum physics. There is one place where you can find the actually miraculous, and it's quantum physics. I don't know how many of you know what entanglement is, and I don't know how many physicists in the audience are going to, like I did with dark matter, tell me that what I'm about to say is wrong. But I'll very quickly tell you what entanglement is. So if you take a subatomic particle, an electron or whatever it might be, and it will have a spin. And the spin will be spinning in all possible directions at once. But let's say that spin is in a certain direction, right? Let's call it a certain direction. And you pair it with another subatomic particle, it will spin in the opposite direction. If you then take particle B and send it 200 light years away, and then, like in Star Trek, reverse the polarity, reverse the spin on the particle you've kept here, that particle, 200 light years away, will immediately spin in the opposite direction. It's 200 light years away. It is apparently communicating with a subatomic particle, right? That is true. Are there any physicists in the audience?
I can tell you that's true.
Yeah, that's true. You're a physicist as well.
No, but I hang out with physicists.
Okay, fine. Right. Are they ontological physicists?
Well, ontologically they exist.
Ontologically they fucking are. Yeah, they exist.
They would make the claim to their own existence, yes.
Okay, so it is true, and that seems like a miracle. And actually, my play that I refer to, God's Dice, is about how you might be able to prove the existence of actual miracles through quantum physics, because quantum physics also posits that anything that can happen will happen. So therefore, in an infinite universe, if it is possible for water to change into wine, then somewhere that's happening, right? However, and this might be because I'm a depressive at some level, right? And I always manage to find a way of upending myself. I believe that the way we talk about quantum physics is a quasi-religious one. If you actually look at all the books about quantum physics, they're all called by Carlo Rovelli or James Green or whatever they might be, or they are all called things like underneath the real, or stripping away reality, or what lies beneath. And so are books about faith. They're called the same thing. We see through a glass darkly, but the truth will be revealed to us. And quantum physics takes that idea and basically applies it to maths. Now, I'm not saying that means quantum physics is wrong, but I think the perspective that we put on it is almost deliberately magical. Partly commercial, because that's the way those books sell, If you know how the observer effect works by the idea that a particle is spinning in all directions at once. We can't say where a particle is until we measure it. This is true, by the way. Another true thing is that a subatomic particle, we can't say where it is or what speed it's going until we measure it, and then we can. So that seems to me to be again miraculous and also very, very human-centered. It seems to be again saying, like we thought in the 16th century, that humans are basically at the center of the universe. So what I worry with about quantum physics is it is a way of rewriting human-centeredness in the world and a way of creating magic and miracles that might have a religious backing. But it is the closest I can get.
Okay, but what I'm getting is that there is only one miracle that would count as proof for you of the existence of God, and that miracle would be the ability to spare you death.
To do what with death?
Spare
death, yes.
Yes, that you don't die. That intervenes and gives you a continuing existence, whether it's in this world or in some other. That's the only, given where you started as that little 6-year-old, and the fear about it, linking of God as a thing, you're more or less saying, if that entity existed that could spare me death, that's the proof I would find.
Wouldn't necessarily want that straight away. I think if God said to me, okay, you can fly, or you
you'd
go
accept
back
some
in
lesser
time,
miracles.
Yeah, or you could be a professional footballer, even at your age. I think I would say, okay, and then death down the line, you'll cheat that.
You'll find that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily go for the big one straight away.
It gives God lots of options.
Yeah,
then.
he's God.
Like, it's small things like...
I might as well ask for more than one wish. I mean, basically what we're saying is he's Aladdin's genie. That's what we're saying here.
You also link the belief of God, well, the desire, with conspiracy theorists as well. Can you unpack that as to how you see there's a connection to the kind of working mind of the conspiracy theorist and the person who's seeking for confirmation of a religious urge? Yeah,
well, one of the things about conspiracy theorists, I think, is I said once that conspiracy theory is how idiots get to feel like intellectuals. And I still believe that to be true. Thank you for the one applause. Everyone else in this room, is a conspiracy theorist.
Okay, everybody, just to give you a bit of affirmation.
No, please don't. No, don't patronise me, come on. But what I believe is that the conspiracy theory urge is the same urge which you referred to earlier, which is that life is essentially meaningless. Random events happen all the time. Often they are terrible things. People do terrible things. And it's somehow comforting to think that you yourself have seen the light. You yourself have spotted the pattern in all these things. And even if the conspiracy theorist's whole thing is I've spotted the evil people who are in control of the world, they happen to be Jews, fancy that. But anyway, even if they seem to be saying this is terrible because there are these terrible people, actually it's comforting. Because it's more comforting to think that there is a James Bond Spectre-like group of people, a cabal, an Illuminati in control of the world, than the much more disturbing truth that really bad shit just happens all the time for no particular reason and we are all fucked. That is a more difficult thing to accept. Indeed, all forms of flux are difficult for humans to accept. It's a story. Conspiracy theory is a story again. Yeah. It's a story that people tell themselves in order to make it like they themselves in their tribe, much like religion, in their particular tribe, with their particular insignia, their particular codes, have understood the world in a deeper way than anyone else has. And that allows them to be comforted by that, and also to have power and all the rest of it. Same as religion. So religion is essentially a conspiracy theory with, for me, one difference, which is, conspiracy theory I basically detest. Whereas religion, I have quite a lot of time for. And I guess I have quite a lot of time for it because this is the difference between me. I don't really disagree with most atheists. But to give you an example, and this is where I come back to the macho thing, Bertrand Russell, probably the most famous, in a way, atheist of modern times, Bertrand Russell said that when I die, Bertrand Russell said, my body and my ego shall rot, but I scorn those, he said, who would shiver at the thought of oblivion. And what I think is I agree with Bertrand's first sentence. I think that when I die, my body and my ego shall rot. But why would I scorn? Think of the macho-ness of that. Yeah. Think of the arrogance of it. Why would I scorn those who shiver with fear at the most frightening thing? Which is, it's terrifying. Oblivion is a terrible thing. And by the way, if you are depressed by what I'm saying, just think of one thing. The reason I'm like this is I love life. I think life is incredible. It's amazing, right? This is amazing. This FODI is amazing. And not just this is actually amazing. This is an incredible event. But, the other day I was just at Circular Quay and I had a really, really bad drink. It was appalling and nasty and I didn't like it. Even that was amazing, right? Just that was happening and that I could have that experience. It was fun, right? And everything is better than the alternative, as people say. And so that's why I feel this. It's not actually a negative thing. It's an incredibly, for me, positive sense that almost all of life, even when it's really bad, is pretty good. I think Ira Gershwin said of sex that even when it's bad, it's pretty good. And that's how I feel about sex, without any doubt, but it's also what I feel about life.
I want to go back to the issue about our childish urge to believe.
Yeah.
And I think your view that we never escape it nor could. And I want to put a counter view that I think actually, endowed with reason as we are, it is possible to go beyond things which are just... This is not just about reason, actually. I think one of the remarkable things about humans is although we have so many urges and desires, we are capable of transcending them and making conscious choices. So there may be a lion out there on a veldt somewhere hunting an impala, but I doubt that it stops and says, I'm hungry, but what about its children?
Yeah.
I think it just kills it, eats it. I think that there are people out there who are starving at the moment who might be presented with someone else's food, and even if there's no one watching them, they won't take it simply because they make a judgment that it's not theirs. And I know for a fact that there are people now in places like Ukraine who are facing the most unimaginable danger, who are not defending their own property, their own children or anything like that, but they stand there merely because they made a promise. So these are all evidence I would provide of human being having this ability to go beyond instinct and desire, even the most fundamental urges, to flee, to preserve your life, for abstract things like promises and these kind of reasons we create.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether or not you'd go so far with me then to say that maybe this deep urge, which I'm not going to deny is existing, some people call it the God desire, the God-shaped hole or whatever it is, might not be filled by something else, and that we could become relieved of the burden of wanting to believe. Do you think we could, or do you think we're going to be stuck?
No, I actually don't think...
Even after all that?
No, I completely agree with you that humans have an incredible ability to be good, with or without God.
Well, just not to be driven by instinct, I suppose. Even just take it, whether it's good or bad.
Some humans.
Yeah.
Some humans and some humans don't. I think, and by the way, I think animals also... I don't agree that animals are just driven by instinct.
I must say, let me put it this way, just to be... Because you do this in your book too, let me take a step back when there's an error. I'd say, as far as we know, that it is certain that humans do have that capacity, at least some.
Yeah.
What we don't know is enough about what other creatures might have beyond that. Now, Jane Goodall and I talked about that, and she was fairly...
You know Jane Goodall?
Yeah, right. And she was rather...
I mean, it's quite a big name drop. We were all impressed, right? I mean, physicists, Jane Goodall,
It's just like an interesting life.
Yeah.
But she thinks that
Cristiano Ronaldo, by any chance?
I wish I did, because then I could really impress. No, I don't.
Okay.
Cricket? I know cricket.
Okay, fine. I'm not interested in cricket. Sorry.
Where were we? Anyway, so I'm accepting that there may be creatures other than us that can do it, but at least it's true of us, even if we don't.
But it isn't. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that I talk about this in the book a bit, which is that I think at heart a lot of this is also about something else, which is that humans need to feel that we, as a species, are the important one. All religion, to some extent, like someone was saying to me the other day, in part of the endless antisemitism that I get on social media, is someone saying, oh, Jews, they think they're the chosen people, blah, blah, blah. And all religions think they're the chosen people, right? Don't they? I mean, if Christians think, which they do, believing Christians, that only through Jesus you will go to heaven, and that I, as an atheist or a Jew or whatever, am going to hell, they're chosen, obviously. So all religions basically look at, it's essentially a Freudian idea, which is that their God is their parent, and they are the favourite child of the parent, and they are witnessed by it and all the rest of it. And part of that is humans need to feel that humans are special as a species, right? Now, I actually don't think we are. I think we're clever. But I don't think we're that special. We're just animals. We happen to be a bit cleverer, not that much more cleverer than other animals. And other animals, without any doubt, are capable of empathy and other directed behavior. My daughter is in the audience, so she will be amazed that I'm telling this story. I'm slightly amazed, but I had a cat called Monkey. I'm obsessed with cats. And I had a cat called Monkey, and Monkey was an incredibly nice person. Unbelievably nice person. Cats are meant to be selfish. One day, Monkey started meowing at my wife in her study in our house, meowing and meowing and meowing. We have 3 other cats who are not related to Monkey, and eventually my wife, thinking, as we all do, yeah, they just want something by instinct, he wants to be fed, okay, I'll go and feed him, came downstairs. When she came downstairs, he didn't go down to the kitchen where the food was, he stopped outside the door of the living room and just waited there, meowing a bit more. And eventually, one of our other cats, Tiger, who is our most stupid cat, his paw came through the door of the lounge and he was stuck. And Monkey, like Lassie, had gone to get my wife to save Tiger, right? And I tell you, that made me think straight away, like, why do we think we're better than animals? We're not better than animals, right? They don't have opposable thumbs or a few other things, but basically, I believe they have empathy, I believe they have kindness.
Do you think they can make then conscious moral judgment? We won't go too far.
That must have been a conscious moral judgment that Monkey made.
Well,
why wasn't it?
It could be.
Why would he save Tiger? Well, Tiger was not his child. Is that true, Dolly? Thank you.
No, Dolly, I'm not. Okay, no one's disbelieving you. I mentioned that I read the books in order, Jews Don't Count, and then The God Desire. And it struck me that there's a really strong connection, that there are themes being picked up, and you've affirmed that was something that grew out of the first book. And there's one scene you describe of watching a play called Leopoldstadt, which begins with a Seder. That's right?
Yeah.
Maybe you tell the story and then what happened to you.
I mean...
Or read it even, maybe.
Well, I might read a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Leopoldstadt is Tom Stoppard's play about the Holocaust, and I talk about how, I'm trying to describe, I think, in the book, how despite being an atheist, I am moved by Jewish stuff, basically, and I found myself incredibly moved at the end of that play for reasons that are all mixed up, to do with religion and family and culture, whatever. But in a way, I think this might, if it's okay, might show it better. Because I talk quite a lot in the book, about how, for me, Jewishness isn't about God. It's not apparently about God, because it's about comedy and food and all sorts of things. I used to say, I don't believe in God, I believe in Larry David. And that's basically true. I believe much more in the culture and the comedy and the food and everything else. But sometimes, like when I'm watching Leopoldstadt, the irony falls away. A friend of mine, a man of science, an atheist, whose son died tragically young, sang Kaddish, the Jewish prayer for the dead, at the funeral. This is what it means in English. I won't read the whole thing, but magnified and sanctified be your name, O God, throughout the world which you have created according to your will. May your sovereignty be accepted in our own days. It goes on. The usual stuff of prayer, the endless OCD like repetition of praise, the desperate hope that if you say something enough times, a fragment might get through the ether. I do not find it moving, but the Hebrew, Yit Kadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Dial Bacharute v'Yamlach Malute b'Yachute Me'ahon Ho'yishei Jachol Beit Yisrael ba'agla uv'achan mazcharav v'imru Amen. Or rather the Hebrew, because the sound in my mind carries the association of the script of the ancient hieroglyphic, which because I had to learn it at my Jewish primary school, I can read. You don't have to know what it means. At the burial of a son, those words, just the sound, the ancient music, the sonic pain of them, connects you, the atheist Jew praying and the atheist Jew listening, with centuries of tradition and suffering and defiance. I knew I would do the same in my friend's terrible place. And sort of the key thing there, which is interesting, I think, is that if I was to really describe the difference between me and Richard Dawkins, it's not just that I have a bit of time for religion. It's because I think that Richard Dawkins and other people like him, and most men, most kind of white Christian men who are famous atheists, They do not know what it means to come from a religious persecuted minority. They don't know what that means. And so as a result, what they do not have is a sense that religion is intertwined not just with your identity, but with your survival. So later on in the book, I quote Simon Longstaff, the historian, talking about how when Jews were forced out of Spain in 1492, you wouldn't know it, would you, were it not for the fact that you could hear, as they were being forced out on the boat, you could hear them saying the Shema, which was the Lord's Prayer. And what's deeply important for me and complicated for me is that's a religious prayer.
Yeah.
That's a cry to God. But I don't think I am moved because of a supernatural being listening to that prayer. I'm moved because, as I say, I connect with centuries of tradition and suffering and defiance. My mother was born in Nazi Germany. It's amazing, it's incredible that this tiny people, many complicated things about being a Jew right at the moment, but still, there is that survival, and the survival is connected with this sound and the feel of the religion, and that, I think, makes it impossible for me to be like Richard Dawkins.
So have you talked to people like Dawkins and said, because you obviously have a deep empathy for people who find solace in the religious faith. And I want to come back to your core argument that if the overwhelming desire to believe it indicates its lack of truth, and unpack that. But before we get to that, I just want to know what happens when you sit down with a Dawkins, if you have, or others in a similar mind, and ask them perhaps to be more moderate, more understanding in their atheism of the need for it, of the respect that might be accorded to people who hold it, and why they might. I mean, you've just given an incredibly eloquent account of how, for all of your atheism, there's this resonance that is still there in that script, which you can't escape its resonance. I mean, I can feel it. When you talked about the play Leopoldstadt, and where you just sat there weeping in the audience, I mean, that's something. So what does a Dawkins say when you say, "Oh well, David, fine, but I'm not harder stuff"? Has he got the stern contempt that you talked about from Russell, or what?
Well, unlike you, I don't know some of the people that I talk about. Sorry, that's an unnecessary gag. I apologise.
A gag has never been deemed by necessity.
I have met Richard Dawkins, but not since I wrote this book. And I've got a lot of respect for Richard Dawkins. But actually, one thing I would say about Dawkins is he definitely dismisses religion as fairy tale. And what I think is wrong with that intellectually is I don't think you should dismiss fairy tale as fairy tale. I think fairy tales say a lot about what it means to be human. And I don't think you can really understand what humanity is unless you're prepared to understand religion. It doesn't mean you have to believe in a supernatural being, but this is a story, many, many different versions of it. And by the way, I'm not just talking about traditional religion. I think there are many things, particularly now, that substitute for religion. Football, for example, substitutes for religion. Look at it, it's got songs, you belong to a tribe, you've got colours, you've got a history, you've got a sort of eternity. The way in this book was written just when the Queen died, Queen Elizabeth II died.
You finish up with this, don't you?
Pardon?
You finish up the book with
that. I've never seen anything so obviously indicative of the God desire as the way that Britain reacted to the death of Queen Elizabeth II. This unbelievable deification, this unbelievable sense that we were connected to eternity via her, via the longevity of her reign, and then, like a relic, huge 7-mile queues to see her coffin. What is that? What is that if it's not like going to see the bones of St. Francis of Assisi and hoping that some of the magic will impart to you? And so the deep sort of consolation somehow, and also her death said something again about mortality for all of us, right? And so all of that is the God desire, I think, written a different way. But I think that you need to try and understand it and not dismiss it, that's all. So I don't disagree with Richard Dawkins. I think that I disagree with him about some other things that he said recently, but I don't disagree with him about the basic principle that these are stories and legends, but I think it is wrong to dismiss them.
Now, in a few minutes, we'll be going to questions. There will be microphones located at the front. I would ask everybody to actually ask a question, not make a speech, and be respectful, because I just think, and there may be a few people who want to do it, so it just gives more chance for everybody to do that. But before we do...
I quite like it when people just come with a long essay that they've written.
Oh, great, thanks.
I find that very entertaining.
Just ignore this bloke, will you?
Sometimes... I don't know, he's probably in here now, but there was a bloke at Coleman's thing he was amazing. He had like 12 sheets of A4. He got through about 4 of them. It was amazing.
Right, well, that's not going to happen. So
Okay.
the idea that an overwhelming desire to believe in something is the evidence itself of its lack of truth.
Yeah.
Unpack that, because this is really the
That's
nub
my
of it.
basic point.
Yeah.
But just to say one thing about that is, it is my basic point, but it's not an abstract point.
No.
The reason that I'm using it is I own it as something I feel.
Yeah.
That's what makes me principally different, is all of the atheists that I've ever read, they absolutely won't do that. They show a sort of bafflement, if anything. Why is it that anyone needs to believe in religion? It just seems so childish and blah, 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 blah. That's why I mentioned that thing about babyishness. So my principal point is that a very, very deep sense of want creates in me a belief that the thing is not real because the want has been fulfilled by stories. I then say, and I feel that want. I'm not going to deny that want in myself.
But what I can't get, and I'm not saying I disagree with it, I just want you to fill in the gaps in the argument really, is why is it that wanting something intensely means that it's not real?
Yeah, well, we come back to that. As I say,
Is it a logical point, or just a thing that you don't think it's real, or?
No, it is a logical point, but it's a logical point. It's not like a logical point, like a philosophical logical point. It's a logical point in terms of my inference is that over many centuries, many different cultures, the same essential legend is told, which is that there are these things, these beings above us, greater than us, who give our life meaning, who give us some kind of immortality, who put us in touch with eternity, who provide magic in our lives so that our lives are not just this thing. Then I think something is being answered there. It's being wanted.
Okay, so let me reframe it for my own understanding. Is it that you're saying that if there is this profound want, and the thing that is wanted was real, then the want would be satisfied and it would subside because of that? In other words, the satisfaction of the want through the existence of the thing which is sought would see it subside. And because it's never satisfied,
yes,
because it doesn't exist,
is a really good, yeah.
Therefore, is that
So this is a really good point that you're making, but I think it's true that the human desire and human wants have a tendency to constantly recreate themselves anyway. So what tends to happen, I think, and this is the reason why we see now so many different types of, as it were, gods, many different types of things being raised up as this is the answer or that is the answer, whether it be celebrity, whether it be something on social media, whether it be wellness, whatever it is, this is the answer. This is because I believe that humans have a deep yearning for something which we need to answer in lots of different ways. So I'm not sure it can be answered. I mean, maybe if there was...
Which may be then the persistence of the urge, because it's never fully satisfied.
The urge persists because it is never satisfied.
Okay, let's go down to the audience. So if anybody's wondering who's come to the microphone, it's Lindy Milan who put all this together. So.
And thank you. Yes, I'm John Caldon's partner, and I want to thank Simon, David, FODI. I want to thank you for this. I'm going to have to listen to this online 6 times over to hear what you've both got to say, because there's so much there. I'm just going to ask one very simple question now. David, what is going to happen when you die? You, not anyone else.
Yeah.
What do you believe is going to happen when you die?
I know what's going to happen when I die. I will return to the state that I was in before I was born, which everyone knows, by the way, that is really what's going to happen. My belief is that everyone knows, in truth, rabbis, imams, priests, every fucker knows, really, because people say we don't know what's going to be like before we die. Yes, we do, because we have a sort of instinct of oblivion when we think about what things were like before we were born. And it's nothingness.
Thank you, because that's exactly what John Caldon thought.
Oh, good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's an awkward one to follow up. Hi, David.
Hi.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. It was a tremendous performance.
Thank you.
And a lovely talk. So I'm part of the academic community. I'm a scientist. And my question for you, as a staunch agnostic, is how do atheists not prescribe to religion?
Not prescribe?
Yeah, in terms of you've preached tonight very beautifully and eloquently, as people have mentioned before, about how there is no life after death and how the things that we do have potentially no meaning. I personally study pro-social behaviour and psychopathy specifically. And as an agnostic, I don't know what happens after death. I know that we can live a good life by doing good things.
Right.
But I don't know what happens after. So
Right.
I live a good life doing things that make me feel good for others.
Sure.
So as an atheist, how do you know with this absolute belief that there is nothing that comes after in the same way that Christians know that there is absolutely an afterlife?
Yeah, well, obviously I don't know, but I absolutely feel I do know. I find, I'm sorry to say this with the greatest respect, and you seem totally lovely, agnosticism, fuck that. I kind of think be an atheist, right? Just don't, like saying I don't know, could be, it doesn't feel to me like a position. And I'd rather say I'm an atheist because it seems to me more straightforward that there is no God. I mean, actually, in the book, I say that I know there is no God like I know that stone is hard, but then I go on to say, because I like upending myself, that I don't know that stone is hard. Stone is only perceived as hard by the sensations that are imparted by my hand, and in fact it's a mess of energy, underneath the stone, so who knows really. But I don't know, but I've never heard anything to make me think otherwise, and I happen to have this belief that the psychology suggests very strongly that primarily the idea that something else does happen is something we can't deal with. Like T.S. Eliot, who believed in God, said that humankind cannot bear much reality, and he meant that as a Christian, that humankind cannot look on the face of God. My opinion is that humankind cannot bear the reality that I've just talked about, which is that we're going back to just a place of oblivion, so they have invented God as a shield from that reality.
Thank you. Gentleman over here.
Thank you, gentlemen. So, how have people responded to this book? Because you've had sort of like Ian Hersey Ali coming out as a Christian. You've had Tom Holland with Dominion saying, hey, he's a cultural Christian, all this kind of stuff. So there's a big discussion around religion, and I'm curious about how your book has been responded to. And then secondly, very briefly, this feels like a book you had to write personally. So I think my question is, did it scratch that itch? Did it do what you wanted it to do?
Okay. That question, the second part of that question makes me want to do a rude joke. So I'm not going to do that. It's FODI, it's an intellectual
chat. You can do rude jokes.
No, I'm leaving it. I'm moving on. I don't know those people, but someone who I do know is Frank Skinner, who is my friend and who I did a football song with that you might know, and I've done lots of comedy with him. And Frank is a devout Catholic. And the reason I bring him up in terms of the reaction to this book is that I've tried really hard to get Frank to read this book, and he says, as a devout Catholic, that he doesn't want to read this book because he read Jews Don't Count and it was very persuasive, right? And he doesn't want to lose his faith, right? And it's not I don't want people to lose their faith or whatever, but I just thought it might be an interesting conversation because in terms of Frank, the first time I ever got to know Frank Skinner properly, we went on a long car journey. We were going in between two stand-up gigs, and he started telling me about, and I'll try and précis this, that he got divorced and he was living with his girlfriend, and that meant he couldn't take communion because the church, Catholic Church, doesn't recognise divorce, so he was committing adultery, so therefore he couldn't take communion, he couldn't get absolution. It went on for ages, and at the end of it, as I'm getting out the car, I said to him, sorry, why are you bothered about all this? And he said, no, you don't understand. I believe that I will burn in hellfire because of this. And I'd never heard anyone in my whole life say anything like that and mean it because I don't live in 1603. But I thought two things, right? I thought, number one, that makes it more interesting to be friends with this guy. This was before social media, but against what everything social media tells us, which is that if someone doesn't believe what you believe, you must have nothing to do with them, and you have no truck with them at all, and life is a binary. That's complete shite, and in fact, someone not believing what you believe makes your relationship more interesting. But also, in terms of the question we had before about what do I know, I don't know. Frank really believes in the literal word of the Bible, and he's told me the one thing I remember that I think, I'm not going to argue with that. I might be a fundamentalist atheist, but I'm not going to argue with that. And that is that, by the way, he sorted it out, his religious quandary by getting in touch with the Pope. Right? That's what you could do if you're a British celebrity. He got in touch with the Pope, he got his marriage annulled. Can you fucking believe it? Anyway, fast-tracked to having his marriage annulled. Anyway, he told me that now that he does, when he eats the wafer, he just feels the presence of God. Now for me, I'm not laughing at that. That is an existential reason to believe in God. And I don't know, it has no logic, no argument, but I'm not going to take it away from him. I'm not interested in doing that. Sorry. I don't think that answered your question, but I thought I'd tell that story.
Microphone one.
David, I assume that, like me, you cannot possibly be a dualist. That somehow you have a spirit inside you and that your body is just like a bus carrying it around. So there can't possibly be anything after death.
Sorry, I'm not a dualist.
A dualist. You believe in a separate spirit and a body.
And a body and a soul.
I don't believe in that. No.
Yeah,
that's
I want
clear.
To confirm
I
that.
thought everything I've been saying should make that clear.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the shortest proposition and agreement I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Jane?
Are you off? Okay, good. Where's the guy with the 12 sheets?
Where are we when you need him?
Right.
Okay.
Not a guy, no sheets.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that the thing, I've been an atheist, I'm a third generation atheist. I have no doubts about it, it feels comfortable to me. But one of the things that has always convinced me about atheism is the way religions treat women.
Right.
It's as if we don't exist as full human beings.
Yeah. Well, that's completely true. And actually, it's a kind of a gag that I said earlier about using the patriarchal pronoun him, but I think religion tends to be intensely patriarchal and intensely about often sort of male repression and repression of male sexuality that they're somehow disgusted by, but at the same time very much expressing in the persecution of women. So I agree with that.
Got time for one more at mic 1, and we'll see if we can get in mic 2.
So thank you so much, it's been great. I'm also a North London Jew.
Hi.
I'm also an atheist. I'm also fascinated by why, when you were reading Kaddish, I'm instantly like, the energy rushing through me is huge.
Yeah.
I'm probably remembering Dad. There's a bit of that, cultural stuff.
Yeah.
I get like that about the Holocaust. I think the only thing that holds religions together is the need, nothing to do with death. I like when you're talking about the death thing, I'm like, I couldn't give a shit.
You're okay with death?
Couldn't give a shit.
Okay.
Well, I think
When you say that, what about the death of your loved ones? You give a shit about that?
No, as in, when you go, you're gone.
Yeah, but
it's for everyone else around you.
Okay, so you're telling me now that you just said you remembered your dad, right, and that moved you.
Yeah.
You're telling me now that you wouldn't at some level yearn for the idea that your dad is still somehow around, somehow there, somehow looking over you?
He's with me. That's all I need.
Okay.
Right? But
that's not a religious instinct, you don't think? He's in your memory. He's definitely in your memory. He's definitely in your memory.
I don't know. I see it as uniquely that.
Okay.
But the reason I ask it is because I think about this quite a lot, particularly at the moment, because the conflict is really hard, and family in Israel and all of that. I think it's the need to connect and to continue connecting when life gets in the way. It's a need to go to synagogue every week, that you'd stop doing if it was tennis, if there wasn't a higher power. So it's that ability to keep a group of people together for a long period of time and other stuff just not affect it. So I'm just really interested, did that enter your mind when you were writing this?
No,
or was it all about death?
No, it's not all about death. So the book is not all about death. I think death is at the heart of it, because death gives us if you really accept that it's this oblivion thing, that it makes life, it can make life meaningless, and we have to find stories to escape that. Now, obviously, one of the stories we also tell is about identity, which an identity, as I talked about in the previous session that I did, has become turbocharged with social media, but we've always done it. We've always created identity because we can't, again, just have human flux in ourselves. We have to label ourselves, and we tend to do that, as I think I said, in opposition. We tend to do it, and that's what leads to rage and leads to war. Is like the way I can feel identified is by being hateful and angry about everyone who is not that. And where does that come from? That comes from religion, right? That comes from Protestants hating Catholics, or Catholics hating Protestants, or Sunnis hating Shia, or indeed Hebrews hating Philistines, or whatever else it might be. That's The need to feel that you are, whoever you are, the chosen people, tends to exist in a binary with being sort of hateful towards other people. Now, there is a nicer version of that, which is just the sense of community and the sense of tradition and all that, but it's still a way of creating identity. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm saying that that is one of the stories we tell ourselves in order to feel human.
Now we're going to try something tricky for you. We're going to get 2 questions to hold both in mind. This is gentlemen, and they're going to be really quick questions.
Okay.
Gentlemen in the mic 2 and then mic 1.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to the point about the strength of the desire for God being the strongest evidence for there not being a God. And when pushed on this, your answer seemed to be about the prevalence of that, all cultures across history and all those things. And apart from the paradoxically macho point that being agnostic isn't really a position, I just wondered what sort of underneath all of that, is it just like feeling a rock and you just have a sense that there's a rock there, or is there actually some evidential basis for why that's enough?
Okay, don't answer.
For believing it.
And very quickly, you got.
What about reincarnation?
What about it?
Okay, right. Those are 2 questions. Is it like a rock, and what about reincarnation? Go for it. Got 40 seconds.
This guy, what's your name, sir?
Ed.
Andy.
It's Ed.
Ed, you know, is one of the people who clearly isn't buying it, and some people don't buy it. That's all I've got, really, and I explore it in this book, but I am deeply convinced that you don't need more evidence. In a way, it's a way of not having, because I think I had a lot of sixth form conversations when I was younger based on evidence of God's existence or non-existence. It's a useless conversation. Even, you know, if you understand Stephen Hawking's assertion that the universe started from nothing as a quantum event, which is really hard to understand, you'll still get people saying, well, what happened before that or whatever. It's an endless, looping, pointless cyclical conversation. In my opinion, it is not a pointless conversation to say, okay, this is why we need God. This is the desire that God salves, that God answers. And if you think about that more and more, and how it happens more and more, and how many legends and stories it's led to, then it seems to me to be evidential in and of itself.
And reincarnation?
Fuck knows about reincarnation, but I want to finish on a story. Can I finish on a story?
Yes, okay.
I mean, you might have to do a wrap-up afterwards, but I just want to tell this story.
Okay.
To be honest, this is just a funny story, although it is slightly relevant, which is we started off talking about Jews Don't Count, and about how that led to this book. And one of the things I encountered when I read Jews Don't Count, which is interesting, I guess, in terms of freely talking about tradition and culture and religion and whatever, is there's a huge amount of Jewish shame. Right? There's a huge amount of people who feel ashamed and feel sort of terrified about telling anyone they're Jewish, and lots of people wrote to me to tell me that they had never told anyone they were Jewish or whatever. And one of the greatest examples I had of Jewish shame was in 1999. I was interviewed outside the FA Cup final, which some of you will know obviously is the big football day, or used to be the biggest football day in the British sort of footballing calendar, outside Wembley, because I was in a football comedy show with Frank Skinner. I was interviewed by a guy called Jim Rosenthal. And Jim Rosenthal, I was quite excited because I thought, oh, he's Jewish, Jim Rosenthal. And when I was a kid, there were so few Jews on British TV, I thought, that's marvellous. He's Jewish. Anyway, I'm being interviewed by him, and I make a joke that won't get any laughs tonight, and didn't really get laughs then, which is, because it was a Saturday, I said to Jim, should you really be working on Shabbos? See? Oh, not bad. I was expecting no laughs. And Shabbos is the Jewish Sabbath, you're not meant to work on it. So I thought he wouldn't even notice that. Instead, he gets really angry and says, right, stop the filming, stop it, stop everything. Right, I'm not Jewish, tells everyone, tells the whole fucking world. I'm not Jewish, I get out of that. He said, I get out of that because of my mum. You may know some people believe that Jewishness is passed down by the mum, right? And it's incredibly embarrassing and awkward. Frank Skinner is really cross with me because he'd done 4 jokes, he had to do them again. It was all really embarrassing. And then, right, so I just thought, oh God, that was awful. Then in 2002, I was in Japan for the World Cup. I'd gone to Japan for the World Cup. And in Japan, as some of you may know, it's closer here than it is in the UK. There's often in hotels a big spa area at the bottom of the hotel. I like spas, so I thought I'll have a bit of that. I go down to the bottom of the hotel and there's a sauna, massive sauna, and I go into it, and there, naked, on his own, in that sauna, is Jim Rosenthal. And you know what? He fucking is Jewish.
Right. So, he tops my James score with the FA Cup and the World Cup.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Baddiel.
Thank you very much. I'm signing. I'm about to sign now out there. Thank you. Thanks very much. You've been lovely. Thank you, Simon.
That's the John Caldon Provocation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
This session was recorded live at Carriageworks Sydney in August 2024. The Festival of Dangerous Ideas is presented by the Ethics Centre. The Ethics Centre delivers programs and experiences designed to bring ethics to the centre of our life. We offer counselling for individuals, leadership and development services, events, courses and educational resources. As a not-for-profit charity, we rely heavily on donations and memberships. Please visit ethics.org.au to find out more. Thank you.